What is your my best friend is dating a terrible person and nobody can get through to them? Story 1. So I have multiple stories, both me being the person not listening to my friends and me being the one to tell my friends their relationship was toxic. But I'm going to stick to the one we can all relate to. In freshman year of college, I made a lot of friends in my dorm room. My side of the building was 2 girls-only floors, sandwiching a guys-only floor. The girls loved to hang out on the guys' floor, and they would stop by my room or my neighbor's first, since we were next to the staircase. Almost every weekend, my girlfriend, 18, who I, also 18, dated, through high school would visit me. The girls who lived in the room directly below us were the first to tell me she's too controlling. At first, I was shocked and just shrugged it off. But then more and more people told me that they didn't like how she yelled at me or what she would tell me to do. She was still in high school, and it's my first year in college. I listened to these new friends, hoping one was right. I would break up with the girl for a few days. Then either she or I would call each other crying and begging to try again. The first 2 or 3 times I was genuinely adhering to the promises I made to her, but she wouldn't, and we would end up breaking up for another week or so. Our relationship had seemed perfect for 2 years before this point. It was getting very obvious to everyone but me that without me being labeled her boyfriend, she was not happy. After a fight that led to a breakup sometime in October of my freshman year, I started publicly dating a girl I had met in my classes. She drives up to the university and starts screaming that, "You need to break up with her. I can't believe you could do this." I broke up with the girl and took my high school girlfriend back. By this 4th or 5th yelling match, everyone in the dorm knew of my situation and persuaded me to try to think about myself. I only thought of pleasing her. I thought of proving people wrong, that she wouldn't change because I was so blinded by love back then. December was great because I was back home for the school year and she loved every minute of it. No fights and everything went well. Back to school in January and everything is okay until 2 weeks in. She breaks up with me because she doesn't think she loves me anymore. 18-year-old me at the time wept for a week straight. It was the first time she had ever said that amidst all our fights. I tried my best to keep our promise to stay friends, even after breaking up, and she continued to visit me every weekend. My roommate and dorm floor buddies also had gotten so fed up with me running back to her, they tried an intervention with our dorm advisor, and I told them that I had feelings for her, but that we weren't dating anymore. They weren't stupid though. They knew that whenever she visited, we would sleep together and then talk about getting back together, but with both of us sobbing afterwards. They encouraged me to move on and took me out partying, among other things. It helped, but it wasn't the nail in the coffin. The last time she visited was in April. She told me she couldn't visit me anymore. Our friend group was from high school and was very close, and I reached out to a few of them to ask what was going on and catch up since we hadn't talked since December. They told me that they didn't know why I was reaching out about my ex, since she had been dating a guy since January. I told them that it couldn't be true because she's not the cheating type, and they told me that she hasn't mentioned visiting me at all since January. June rolls around and I finally have the courage built up to go to her house and ask her about what was happening. She confessed to all of it. The first confesses to cheating on me during our relationship. But it only happened once, and I was really sad and lonely that you weren't home with me. She confessed that she had lied about falling out of love for me. She confessed that she really wanted to be with this guy, but her love for me was too powerful. I gave up on loving anyone but myself for a while. I can buy myself flowers, write my name in the sand. Story 2. Date is probably not the right 4-letter word to use here, but I had a friend who was head over heels for a guy that was basically just using her as a toy for years. She'd maintain his house, take care of his pets, and basically bend over backwards for him for anything, both figuratively and literally, because she thought it would make him love her eventually. Thing is, it was not mutual. He didn't like her like that, only saw her as a friend, which he openly admitted to both us and her. But she didn't get it, or was in denial. He would also constantly berate her right in front of us. He was very quick to anger, and would often try to intimidate or threaten people that were disagreeing with him. He wasn't stupid though. He would never make actual threats of violence, just raise his voice a bit, move closer to you to skirt that line. He was a very fit guy, so it often worked. Anyway, this went on for years, which amazed me the most because I've never seen a friend with benefits relationship go that long. Usually someone eventually says, "Screw this," and moves on by then. But nope, she did not. He kept dating other girls, which would emotionally destroy her, but she'd stick around and keep taking care of his stuff for him. Then the guy and his girlfriend would break up, so they'd go back to their friends with benefits situation, which she was seemingly content with since it meant that they got to be together in some capacity. Then he'd find another girl to date and they'd go back to square one. To this day, it is the most bizarre, semi-abusive relationship I've ever seen. I haven't spoken with her in a while, so I kind of wonder if they're still doing this. The whole thing feels like a really slow-ticking time bomb ready to go off, but it just won't. Story 3. Dear friend of mine, female, I'm male, took up with a guy at work, ex-Special Forces, severe jealousy issues. Both have kids from other marriages. She has custody of hers. His could only come over on weekends. Once his ex came with her current boyfriend to drop off the kids for the weekend, leaving the boyfriend in the car. The guy, let's call him John, got in the car with the boyfriend and beat him clean into the hospital just because he couldn't handle the idea of his ex with anybody but him, even though she was the ex. John gets arrested. My friend's special needs kid understandably freaked the heck out and had to take sedatives just to get through the next few days. So since John is in Special Forces, he gets charged with assault with a deadly weapon and criminal trespass because he got in the ex's car without permission to beat the guy up. While he was in jail and charges were pending, the old friend and I went and had a drink, and I tried to explain to her how bad things really were. She already caught him cheating on her once in the past, as a point of reference. John and I had worked together in the past, and I asked her how badly he'd take to just the thought of us having a drink, and she said, "Oh, he'd spray your brains all over the wall with a pistol. He was always super jealous of you for knowing me for such a long time, even before he came along." Then I asked her how her special needs kid would freak out if John turned his fists to her, which I know for a fact he already had in the recent past, and she agreed that the little girl would probably have to be institutionalized over the trauma. I asked her if she thought that any of this was a risk worth taking by staying with him, and she said, "Oh, no, he's fine. All that stuff is in the past. He's changed his ways." There really wasn't any further point, so I said, "Okay, I'm not your mama. Best of luck to you." She married John just before he went to prison for 17 years without parole, and now will have no contact with me for fear of what John will do when he's freed if he finds out. That's all I got. Just a freaking shame. Story 4. My fiance's best friend, let's call her Nicole, dated a guy a few years back. Let's call him Chad. Chad had a problem with drinking and drugs, and would come home loaded and beat her on a regular basis. Nicole had a problem with depression and drugs, although always working to better herself, and believed that love conquers all, and Chad was a great person inside that nobody saw the good in him that she saw. Nicole had a supportive family and stuck behind her through thick and thin, but Chad would always just enable her to use again. Nicole showed up to family dinners with bruises, to which Nicole would say were accidents and Chad didn't mean to. Her family urged her to leave him and call the police, as the police wouldn't listen to her mother because she wasn't the victim. Nicole finally got on the right track and filed a domestic violence case against Chad. A restraining order was put in place, and Nicole was back getting the help she needed and putting her life back together with the support of her family. The police told her to keep a log of any time Chad tried to contact her or see her or harass her. This turned out to be an everyday event of her logging his attempts without her responding to him once. After about 3 months of this, Chad began threatening her. Nicole reported every incident to the police, and they would go to Chad, and he would deny everything, even with her daily logs she kept. The police said they were doing everything they could, and recommended her blocking him, if she hadn't already, on all modes of communication, and just ignoring him until he lost steam and got it through his head and went away. Chad showed up one night to Nicole's new apartment. She had moved 3 times in the past 6 months, and ended her life. His defense was that he was messed up on drugs and needed help, so the court did not give him a life sentence. Since this incident, my fiancé and Nicole's family have worked for years and finally last year got a law put into effect that requires repeat offenders of domestic violence to wear a 24-hour GPS monitoring anklet that would work with an app to alert the victim if the offender came within a certain distance and automatically send the police if less than 1,000 yards away. Story 5. Exchange dating for marriage. Here's the lowlights of his relationship. His schedule is set by her. His money, her money, he has zero input, and she is awful with money. He recently drained his 401k so they could pay off credit card debt, and 3 months later she bought a new car. 3 months after that, they went on a 2-week international vacation. He runs all her errands, including driving 40 minutes out of the way to bring her lunch because she forgot to bring it. 6 months in, she made him abandon his only 2 hobbies, hunting and fishing, because it's cruel to animals. She is a large woman and not a vegetarian. He must respond to text messages within minutes, no matter what he is doing. He gets motion sickness if he isn't the driver in a car, but she insists that he rides as a passenger because of one accident he got in 6 years ago. She is the scariest driver I've ever met, speeding with her phone constantly in her hand. He gets verbally put down in public and private settings. She complains about him every chance she gets, yet he never says a negative word about her. 0 intimacy in the past 3 years. He stays home to watch the kids while she goes out to bars and events several nights a week. Is huge into multi-level marketing stuff, even attending the big conventions in other cities when they happen. The list goes on and on and on. Our circle of friends is pretty tight, and we all see him looking absolutely miserable, exhausted, and crabby every time we see him. He looks like he's pushing 55, even though he's only 40. We all want him to get out of this abusive marriage, but anytime anyone even comes close to saying anything, he gets extremely angry, defends her, and starts being crappy to everyone. Story 6. Oh, I had one of those friends back in high school. She and this other kid started dating all lovey-dovey for a while, but after a bit, she completely shut down to all of us. It was like something inside of her passed away. She started saying how she wanted out of the relationship and how she couldn't stand him anymore, but for some reason she just never broke up with him. He got worse and worse with her over time, started hitting her and threatening her. Eventually her parents and the police got involved and they broke up for like a month or 2, but then they just got back together. From then on, she weirdly seemed to bounce back and forth between being super in love with him and happy that they're together, to looking all dead inside and seeming unable to stand him, and it just went on like that, and he'd go too far, they'd break up for a bit, and then get back together again over and over. We all tried to talk some sense into her, but she'd get angry at everyone, telling us it's none of our business, and we should stay out of her life. I think her best friend got so frustrated with her over that she completely cut her out because she couldn't talk sense into her or help her, but she also couldn't stand to watch it go on. We lost touch pretty quickly after high school, so I didn't really know how she ended up. I want to believe everything turned out all right, but it's so easy to see a scenario where she ended up marrying that guy out of high school and spent the rest of her life miserable and trapped with him. Story 7. They each have a daughter from a past relationship. Her daughter lives with them and gets everything under the sun. His daughter is treated like an outsider when she visits. Both girls are 4. They were supposed to each get a tablet for Christmas, so I bought them each a tablet case as their gift. It wasn't until Christmas morning that I realized the girlfriend's daughter was the only one to get the tablet. More often than not, when his visit with his daughter is approaching, the girlfriend picks fights with him, and he ends up not getting his daughter. If it's not a scheduled visit for the guy and his daughter, the girlfriend picks fights on Thursdays or Fridays. They break up for the weekend, then she comes crawling back on Sunday night. This usually happens immediately after he pays all of their bills. Now they have a child together, and she made him quit his well-paying job with benefits to stay home with the baby so she could waitress. He decided to go to school part-time, an hour commute, and she refuses to take care of their daughter on her days off, so he had to leave school. I've also recently learned that even though she gets $1,100 a month in family allowance, plus her pay and tips and his parental leave, they never have any money to buy for their baby. And I've learned the reason for this is that she has a coke habit. He's my brother, and when I try to explain things to him and tell him he needs out, he fights with me and calls me crazy, and I'm the reason for all his stress. Story 8. Buddy of mine started dating a stripper and was absolutely smitten with her. There's nothing wrong with that profession, but he was just kind of at a different place in life than her, and we all knew there was no way it was going to work out. He can party, but she was absolutely wild. We all tried to gently point this out to him, but he wouldn't hear any of it and got upset with us for trying to sabotage his happy relationship. All things moved forward. She started having angry outbursts and literally just running away almost every time we'd hang out. Still, he persisted with the relationships. Eventually, she was ousted from her apartment for not paying rent, and to all of our dismay, my friend invited her to move in with him. I've never facepalmed so hard in my life, but he's an adult and can make his own decisions. It ended several weeks later when he came home to find she had thrown all of his clothes and belongings out the window onto the sidewalk in a tantrum and was trying to kick him out of his own apartment. He finally saw the light. Funny side note, a week before he met her, my girlfriend at the time and I were out drinking, and she commented on how she'd always kind of wanted to go to a strip club, so we made the wasted decision to call a limo and go. It turned out to be the club my friend's ex worked at on a night she was a regular, so I probably saw her boobs before he did. Story 9. Luckily, my friend finally realized, but for a few years she was with this guy. She already had a baby before they got together, then not long after, she got pregnant with him. Now, there's a lot to this story. Number 1, her daughter she had before they got together was diagnosed with cancer a few months into their relationship. Now, I hold my hands up. He stepped up to the point she called him her dad. But whilst going through this horrible journey, he talked to other girls online behind my friend's back. When she found out, she became super paranoid, and the poor woman had enough to worry about as it was. Anyway, this went back and forth for a while. They both cheated on each other at some point. The relationship was toxic. Fast forward to 2013, her daughter passed away at the age of 4. God, I miss her. Their relationship is still awful. Then finally, the last straw. Brace yourselves. Now, when her daughter was alive, she'd get a lot of charity money given to her from people, kept it in a piggy bank, and given the situation, there was quite a bit of money in there. Turns out her now ex-boyfriend had been stealing her deceased daughter's charity money to fund his drug habit, and also stole from his son's savings, leaving my friend with nothing at the time to spend money for her son's birthday. Too long didn't read, my friend's ex stole money from her deceased daughter's savings. That was the final straw for her to break up with him. Story 10. My sister-in-law has always had weight issues, thanks to her parents who always called her Little Fatty growing up. At 21, she went rummaging through humanity's garbage can and brought home the first piece of crap to show her any attention. Within 9 months of meeting him, they were married, and within a year she had his baby. This guy has it all. He's openly rude to her and her family in public and in front of her parents. He has about a 5th grade education and 0 plans to improve himself. He has a baby with another woman who he never sees and never tries to. He has a drinking and gambling problem. He also makes sure it's a his money, her money situation and gives all his money to his parents, who are better off, his nieces, and on booze and gambling. So my sister-in-law, who does now make a lot, basically supports them. He insists on living in the crampiest, most dangerous part of town, even though they've dealt with several break-ins, and they could live closer to her parents for less than they pay now. Speaking of them, they're basically raising his baby because she works, and he just stays out as much as possible. I figured they wouldn't last a year, but now I fear she'll never leave him, and the kid is going to turn out super messed up. Story 11. The guy loved bragging about what a peen he was, treated her like crap, and never seemed interested in her. Until he found out how rich she was. One of her dad's companies got sold, and the news was public, so her dad couldn't keep his name off the Forbes list. Then he publicly declared they're together after 3 years of toying with her. At every family event he was at, he just treated it like one big networking bonanza. Doesn't seem to have a clear job, but claims he's in finance, claimed to be working remotely while freeloading at her parents' place for 6 weeks, and happily treating all their household staff like they were his employees. We all tried telling her, and even though we are like sisters, she actually told me it's okay if you don't like him, you don't have to. Her father reminded her that it's in their family constitution that any potential spouse must be thoroughly vetted by private investigators first. He gave her the courtesy of warning her that he was going to do it in exchange for her agreement that she won't tell him while the investigation is ongoing. She confidently agreed, completely believing he'd come clean. Yeah, the butthole was cheating on her. She was a mess for the longest time, but fortunately, she's fine now and married to the most awesome guy ever. Story 12. When I was in high school, my best friend started dating a fellow that was known to be a piece of crap, but she was in love and we couldn't convince her that it was a bad idea. He started beating her almost immediately, but that didn't deter her at all. He would take her car and pick up other girls, but they were just friends. She got him a cell phone in her name and ran up enormous bills that she couldn't pay. He gave her herpes, and we were like, okay, maybe now she'll leave him. Nope. He was street racing in her car and smashed it up, and she forgave him, even though she couldn't afford to get it fixed. He took all her money. We begged and pleaded with her to leave him, and she said she would, but then secretly kept seeing him. Then one night we went to a community dance, and he started strangling her in front of everyone. It took 3 huge guys to get him off of her, and the police were called. He ended up leaving her after that, and she was devastated. The hold he had over her was crazy. And what was even more crazy were the girls that got together with him after all this happened, knowing full well what he was like. Insanity. Story 13. I have a friend who dates guys she knows none of us like just for attention and then throws a fit when we state we don't like them. I'm talking storming off when we refuse double dates, dragging them to parties just to sit in the corner and make out with them, or worse, straight up straddle them on the couch, asking us why we refuse to hang out with them and then having more tantrums when we tell her why. She dates guys who have invalidated her gender and have wildly different views than the ones that she is absolutely radical about, ones who refuse to communicate with any of us and vape just obnoxious amounts, and most recently one who she falsely accused of assault. When these fall through, she then expects all of us to baby her until a week later when she gets another despite sobbing about the last one a day before. She's a disaster, and I finally cut her off when she lied to me about having an eating disorder to get my attention. I suffered from an eating disorder from the time I was 12 to when I was 16, and she knows that full well and how much it affects me. Story 14. My sister-in-law dated this high school dropout pothead townie forever. In fairness, they started dating in middle school and were on again, off again for years. No one, even her parents, could understand what she saw in this guy who had no background, no ambition, and no discernible good qualities. He was just the local neighborhood kid who started creeping on my sister-in-law when they were young and would never go away. She just kept telling us we don't see what she sees in him. Eye roll. Eventually, we just accepted that nothing we said was going to change her mind. And after a decade or so, we got to know him and realized that he absolutely loved her with all his whole heart and would do anything for her. He was actually really handy with a strong work ethic. He's great with kids and will be a great dad. Turns out he realized early on that he loved her, and it's actually a boy meets girl hometown romance. She saw all this in him the whole time, and we never really looked past the surface. They finally got married a few weeks ago, and I couldn't be happier to call him my brother-in-law. Story 15. Girl I knew got knocked up by this dude who had a knack for catching assault charges and getting sent to jail and or prison. Despite his violent behavior, even toward family members, though not as violent as his full-fledged assaults, she was adamant about marrying him. Apparently he wanted her to drop out of college and be a stay-at-home mom that he supported. Two things there. First, good luck doing that as a felon in this economy. Not impossible, but unlikely. Second, maybe I'm jaded, but to an outsider, that seems like obvious economic manipulation that this guy wanted her to depend on him so he could keep cheating on her and whatnot. After he got released from this latest stint, he cheated on her again and she finally wised up and dumped him, but she still constantly posts conflicting stuff on social media about how she loves him but also hates him. Dude was clearly bad news from the beginning. She seems to be doing fine as a single mom with family support, but pretty much everybody could see the writing on the wall, except for her. Story 16. This might not be what this thread is looking for, but in this case, the friend was me. My ex-wife would invite a couple of her friends over for a week for dinner. Whatever else she was an excellent cook. She was also sleeping with at least 3 other guys and carrying on an online affair. I suspect her one friend knew about it and tried to tell me about it over dinner on more than one occasion. She explained that she had a friend who was getting married, but her fiancé didn't know that she was cheating on him all the time with a bunch of different guys. And I would say, well, why don't you tell him? And she would go, it's complicated. I know him well enough, but she's been my friend for years, and I don't want to alienate that friendship. It was a recurring topic of conversation at weekly dinner. We were divorced by the time I realized she was talking about me. Story 17. They got together and she immediately took over his house, which she began referring to as her house. He would come home and find out that she had her father over, and the two would actually remodel portions of the house without even letting him know. Dude was a commercial artist, so he had a small office and studio in one of the unused bedrooms. While he was at work, her and her dad took everything out of his office, moved it to the basement, and then moved the washer and dryer to that room. Then apparently realized that there were no ducts for the driver, and they needed some 220 outlets installed, so she called him at work, mad that this house sucked, and he needed to get an electrician over there ASAP to fix this, which he did, paying the emergency rate. Was hoping he'd see the light. Unfortunately, he did, but only after 2 kids and forcing him to quit his good job with benefits. Story 18. Soon after getting together, she moved into his apartment. She turned his spare bedroom and office into her music room. Next, she turned his garage into her yoga studio. She never did yoga. She preferred his car but wouldn't let him drive hers, meaning there were many nights where he was stuck at home while she was out with her friends. She controlled his drinking. The few times he was out, he was allowed 1 drink, which she usually drank. while she got totally rat-faced. She often stayed over at other guys' friends' houses, 'cause it's too late to drive home. She planned an elaborate holiday trip, which he paid for, to visit her ex. Relationship lasted a little under a year before she broke up with him, because he turned 36 and she only dates guys who are 35. Story 19. We had one friend in our group who was this introverted but sweet guy. He hooked up with a girl we'll call the Troll. I don't quite know what he saw in her, maybe he was just lonely, but she was unattractive, unpleasant, unintelligent, and most importantly, she was terribly domineering. Like, she was telling him off and telling him what to do in public. I dread to think what it would be like in private. She was also cutting him off from his friends, especially female ones. They're married with twins now, and none of our friend group are in contact with him anymore. Story 20. I watched my best friend's wife, thankfully now ex, systematically dismantle him. It was horrible to watch. I was vocal about how much it bothered me, and it drove a wedge between us, and some years passed where we didn't speak to each other. We have since reconnected, and she's out of the picture. It was hard hearing him say, "Dude, you were the only one who told me it was a bad idea, and I pushed you away." But I'm glad he saw the light. Story 21. They broke up and got back together 11 times. That's not just an arbitrary number I pulled out of my butt. I was keeping count, and it finally ended with breakup number 12, when she took a trip without inviting him or telling him she was going, and posted a bunch of pics to Instagram of her with the guy she was cheating on my friend with. Story 22. Not my friend, but me. I was dating this girl, and she was horrible for me, but I was blind to it. A few friends told me how different we were, but I always defended our relationship. We dated for 3 years. Only after we broke up did I realize how toxic it was. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.